This is where I had basically landed in the Bay Area after the 2008 crash. I didn't have a job. I had worked at this company for a brief moment after Hurricane Katrina. I reached out to people, said, I need a job, got anything? They gave me an office job. I turned that into a video marketing job, which then turned into my first content role. And the prowess of marketing there was not what it is in SaaS, B2B SaaS marketing, of you need to be like the best to like actually like succeed here. And so going from there to Eventbrite made that question everything go fully internal. And when people talk about imposter syndrome, I had a monster inside of me of an imposter that one of the first questions I got asked after I accepted the role was like, oh, where are you coming from? Was like someone in sales. And I said, what do you mean by that question? And they're like, oh, well, what university? Or are you coming from like Facebook or something? I'm like, it's this company called Intrax. And they're like, oh, pharmaceuticals? No, it's a cultural exchange. Never mind. Like, I started to like realize I was like not like the rest of everyone else and started to question myself.
I've had a rebellious streak since I was a little kid. Like I picked the opposite sports team that my dad liked just because I wanted to be different. I also grew up Catholic and went to confirmation and all that stuff. And I remember 5th, 6th, 7th grade, I started listening to George Carlin, who became one of my intellectual heroes. So I became that person as well for like many of the institutions and education and whatnot, but also with myself. Like I find like I always scrutinize every like little decision and kind of overthink things. But there's part of me that wishes sometimes, you know, the ignorance is bliss thing, that I could just go, all right, here's the common assumptions and the best practices, and here's the path that I could take. Let's just do it, as opposed to like, you know, sitting there kind of like stewing on every little thing. Have you gone through that mental fight with yourself too?
So you're right. Like when you have that rebellious streak and you have that question everything, it's a misconception, I think, to the people who don't do that you're only questioning. I mean, there are narcissists, and I don't believe we're narcissists that question everything but don't question themselves. But when you really are like questioning everything, you tend to also look introspectively. And I had that where I went from, before Eventbrite, was working at a company called Intrax. This is where I had basically landed in the Bay Area after the 2008 crash. I didn't have a job. I had worked at this company for a brief moment after Hurricane Katrina. I reached out to people, said, I need a job, got anything? They gave me an office job. I turned that into a video marketing job, which then turned into my first content role. And the prowess of marketing there was not what it is in SaaS, B2B SaaS marketing, of you need to be like the best to like actually like succeed here. And so going from there to Eventbrite made that question everything go fully internal. And when people talk about imposter syndrome, I had a monster inside of me of an imposter that one of the first questions I got asked after I accepted the role was like, oh, where are you coming from? Was like someone in sales. And I said, what do you mean by that question? And they're like, oh, well, what university? Or are you coming from like Facebook or something? I'm like, it's this company called Intrax. And they're like, oh, pharmaceuticals? No, it's a cultural exchange. Never mind. Like, I started to like realize I was like not like the rest of everyone else and started to question myself. Even though I had worked my butt off to like become a good communicator, good storyteller, I just suddenly was like questioning everything. And it took a lot of therapy, a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, I picked up a meditation habit that I've now been meditating for a little over 3.5 years every day.
Nice.
And it took a lot of that to sort of get to the point that you were saying of being able to just let something go and see where it goes and not have to question and overthink something and embrace this like faith of like, let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. This is an amazing conversation. It's deep to start, but I'm happy for that. We had a conversation 2 weeks ago with the co-founders with our trajectories into content marketing, and there was like 3 things in common. One was that we had mentors that kind of helped us like, you know, push ourselves and believed in us more than maybe we did. The other thing, well, we kind of like followed similar paths, kind of stumbling our way in here. And then the last one was we were all very insecure in ourselves early in our career, to the point where David and I talked about it. Like up until a couple of years ago, I thought I was going to get fired every day. Like it was just like always like, I'm like, when's the other shoe going to drop? When are they going to like find me out? You know? And now I don't feel like that, which is great. But there was something that came up, which is, it's like when somebody gets really rich and then they tell you money doesn't make you happy. It's like, well, that's a great vantage point that you can say that from now, but like you got there through this path. So something that I thought is maybe that insecurity and anxiety did give you that push that, you know, you elevated yourself to a different level that you wouldn't have without that. And you don't want to like carry that chip on your shoulder, like your whole career, your whole life. But like, maybe there is something to that pushes you in like maybe a farther direction than otherwise.
I think there is. And so I've reached a point in my career where I mentor people. And there are some people that I've mentored who I witnessed them going through the imposter syndrome. And one of the earliest mistakes I made was thinking that telling them that they're going like what I'd gone through and how it really is all in your head. I had this belief that telling them would help them see the forest for the trees and just snap out of it. And it just didn't happen. And I was like, oh, okay, well, now what? Like, I thought I had the clue because I had gone through that experience of just go this way, not that way. And it was through the process after that of helping them find those opportunities to work through it on their own that I started to believe exactly what you're saying is, I hate to use Star Wars, but it's the thing from The Last Jedi that Yoda says of like, failure is a great teacher. And failure, I mean, as long as you're analyzing those failures, you will always get better. And that's something that I then started to retrospectively look at my 4.5 years at Eventbrite, where I went from a fish out of water to scaling the global operation and running it up until the point where I was building an in-house media company and got the cross-functional buy-in to do it. The only thing that stopped me was a pandemic. But it's only in that retrospective that I saw that going through the shit and the crap that made me into the person that could deflect, you know, the shit and the crap that came at me when it mattered most, which is like once you reach like a senior level, especially at like a company like Hopin or any other startup that is pretty much relying on you to do a very important job. It helps you deal with the scrutiny. It helps you deal with being under like a microscope from the executive level to where you've been through that. You don't, and it's better to go through it back then when I was an individual contributor than to go through it now, because if I went through it now, let's just say I'd be like a certain CEO that got a 45-page PowerPoint written about him and why they didn't deserve the job. And I would rather fail at that level of IC than as I move up the ladder in my career, because I learned the lessons, and there's still a lot of failure to be done, I'm sure, in my career. I'm not saying it's all smooth sailing from here, but going through it as bad as I did, I think definitely shaped me to be more resilient as I am today.
Yeah, I'm sure like there's positions that you probably aren't qualified for in life. And like, you're going to learn that lesson one way or another if you get in those positions. But it sounds like the process to overcome some of the imposter syndrome and build confidence and I guess, like stillness in where you are, is to have some sort of an opportunity where you feel maybe overwhelmed. Enter that wholehearted, and you're going to be a little afraid. You're going to be a little nervous, but like pick off, one thing, get that done, achieve small things and get better every time. And then you look back and you're like, holy shit, I did those things. And then you have some sort of a track record of experience that you can actually objectively say, okay, I'm probably okay.
Yeah.